Welcome to the Fingerboard Geography video. So here, this video is here to help you understand the geography of the fingerboard of your stringed instruments. So violin, viola, cello, bass, fingerboard are set up in pretty much the same. The fingerings are going to vary by instrument, but the way in which it's set up is the same. In order to know how your fingerboard is set up, it's very helpful to first visualize the order at which those notes are going to appear. It's the same for all instruments. The piano keyboard sets things up really nicely. You'll notice that there are two black keys and then a grouping of three black keys. While the white keys right to the left of the two black keys are going to tell you where C is. So these groupings won't change the whole fingerboard. Now you can see if you just start from C and work up the musical alphabet, you get C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and it repeats. So here's C. Now the very next key is actually not D, but the C sharp and D flat button. You'll notice that that black key is right next to the white key. And right next to that you have your D, then your D sharp and E flat button, then E, F, F sharp, G flat, G, G sharp, A flat, etc., etc. It goes all the way up to B. You notice I don't keep going because we've already started at C and done it, and the sequence and pattern will never ever change. There's 12 notes here, and that's it. There are no more. Now, why does one button on this keyboard have two different names? Now, when you start with the pitch C and then go up one half step, what we're doing is we're making that note sharp, and sharp means to go up in pitch by one half step. A flat is just the opposite. What you're doing is you're going down in pitch by one half step. That means if you take your C and you go up one half step, you're doing a C sharp. And the same thing applies for D. If you have your D and you go down, what you do is you're flatting it, you're going D flat. The notes are the same on the keyboard, C sharp and D flat. It's the same button, but they have a different spelling. When two pitches are the same note with different spellings, we call that enharmonic. C sharp and D flat are therefore enharmonic. That's because some keys like to use sharps and other keys like to use flats. But why it's important for you as a string player is that once you've learned C sharp, you've already learned D flat as well. So it's nice to know that you've learned two notes at once. And what I'm going to do now is take the same linear sequence of notes from the keyboard, all 12 notes here, and instead of keeping them in a line that goes across, I'm going to put them sort of in a line that goes down. And why that's important is because that's pretty much how our strings are set up. In the case of a cello, you have an open C string. Well, the very next note that you could make with your low first finger on your C string is going to be a C sharp, or D flat, as I just learned with the enharmonics. Well, then the next note you could have is a D, and then a D sharp. And you'll notice that all of these notes pretty much go right down the fingerboard. Open C being at the top, and then note by note, you go ahead and go down. Now, if I put a fret or a tape on every single pitch that you could have there, it would look something like that. So here is an example of what the strings look like for everybody in the orchestra. Note that the bass strings are backwards, and I added a C string for the cellos and violas and an E string for the violins, but this is all the strings. What's important to note here is that the sequence of notes and pitches never change. I have C, the next note is going to be C sharp. Now, even if you're starting on a different string, like in this case, I show you the G string, even if you're starting on a new string, the next note is always going to be the C sharp and D flat. And after that, it would always be D, etc., etc. So it doesn't really matter where you start, the sequence is always the same. Okay, now let's start by looking at how the bass works. So the bass only has 3 pitches under their fingers plus the open string. So when the bass is in first position, and they start with the open E string, and then they put their first finger down in first position, that first note's going to be an F sharp. Second finger will be a G, and fourth finger is going to be your G sharp or your A flat. Remember, they're the same Same spot, just two different spellings. That's enharmonic. So that's why basses have to learn shifting really early on, much earlier than all the other stringed instruments. So there's your first position. What if you take that and just move your hand up? If you move your hand up, you're now in something called low second position. And this is second position, and you can either be in a low or a high second position. So now you put your first finger down, not on the F sharp, but on the G. And now you can reach a note that was previously unreachable. And the same thing applies moving your finger up another half step. Now you're in high second position. And now you can reach other notes. And this is really helpful if, let's say, you have to play a G sharp and a D. If you have to play a G sharp and a D, you can play your first finger on the E string and your second finger on the A string. Now you don't have to jump over the A string or do lots of string crossings. You can just cross one string instead of two. So it's good to know all your fingerboard geography. So we can just go on up. After high is low third, and you just keep going up, high third. The basses go up quite a bit. You got your low fourth position. I bet you can guess what's coming up next. That's right, high fourth position. We're going to go up one more till we get to the end of that octave. Low fifth position. Then you've covered an entire octave. If you wanted to keep going, you could. And high fifth position. And then you would go to sixth. Well, we're going to leave that for now and look at the cello fingerboard. And the cello fingerboard covers more notes than does the bass. So here we're in first position. Now you'll notice that there are two types of finger patterns, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then if you wanted to get one note higher, one half step higher, what you can do is you can stretch that fourth finger. When you do that, you end up replacing your third finger with your second. We call this extended finger position. So you're extending your fingers. So you can learn both sets of fingering. So when you play your third finger, just know that it's also possible to play that with your extended second. And just like the bass, in the cello we're going to go up by positions, low second position, and then high second position. And when you go up, keep in mind that your whole hand moves as one unit. And that way it's very easy to place all your fingerings. So here you are in low third position. If you have your second finger in regular position down, it would be on an F sharp. If you had your third finger down in regular position on the C string, then you have yourself a G. If you wanted to be in low third position and you had to play a G and then an A on the C string, you could play extended 2 and then your extended 4. And that works for all your strings, high third and low fourth. Now you notice the bass had to go in a much higher position, up to fifth position, in order to just cover the notes in that octave range, while the cello only has to go to low fourth position to cover the notes in that octave range. Well, they could keep going if they so chose. I'm just going to stop it. Now here I am with the violins and the viola. Now the violas have a C string and the violins have an E string. So I threw them both on at the same time. Although the violas would just ignore the E string and violins would ignore the C string. The finger pattern is actually the same. You're going to put your first finger down in first position and you're going to get all those notes on those strings. You can then put your second finger right next to it and you have a low 2, or you can bring it a whole step up with a space between it and you'd have a high 2. I also have a low 3, high 3, 4, and you can actually stretch that 4 up a little bit higher and get your extended 4. So you actually have a lot of notes in between, a lot of notes that you can cover in just that one position. So we're not going to have to shift as much to get all the way up to that octave range. We can go to low second position. You can shift that whole hand up as one unit and you're in high second position. And then this is pretty much your third position. You can get up to third position and have that whole octave covered. So if you're on the A string and you have your first finger down, you're playing a D. That's the same note you would be playing if you had your third finger down. So you're just replacing your third finger and you're in third position. You could keep going up, high third, low fourth, high fourth, low fifth, high fifth, 6th, 7th, 8th. You can keep going up in positions. We're just going to stop right here because we've got all our notes covered. And take a look here. You can see uh, how many more notes the violins and violas get covered than do the cellos and even the bass. Okay, now we're going to figure out some bass fingerings. Even if you're not a bass player, you can still follow along and see how the fingerboard chart works. So the first note we have is an E. So all these notes are going to be on the E string. This is taken from an exercise that I gave out a while ago. So here I have my open E string, and you'll notice that it's an open string. So that one's pretty easy. The next exercise example I have is a G. And so here I have to find a G somewhere on my E string. And there it is. So if I look across, the fingerboard tells me it's a second finger if I'm in first position. Nice. The next one is a G sharp. So I find my G and I go up a half step. And there's my G sharp or A flat. And I know that it's my fourth finger. Life is good. The next note is interesting. It's a double sharp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my F. This is an F double sharp. So my F is right here. And I'm not going to go sharp once, which raises it by a half step. I'm going to go sharp twice, which raises it by 2 half steps. You notice it takes me to a G. Now F double sharp and G are enharmonic, meaning they have 2 spellings, but they go to the same spot on the fingerboard. So there's a G. You'll notice that it's played with my second finger. The next note is a G flat. So I find my G flat right there, and that's with my first finger. So there you go, and that's how you figure out fingerings in first position in the band. When you come over here, you'll find that there's a couple other changes here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to half position instead of first position. Now half position is just going back 1 half step, so that my first finger falls on your F instead of the F sharp. Now if that's the case, and I had to figure out what this first note was, it's an F, I would find my F on the E string and see that it's with the first finger. I could not play that note in first position. I have to switch back to half position to get this note. So therefore it's my first finger in half position. This note's a G. Now you could play it in first position, but if you're already in half position, it makes sense to just drop your fourth finger. There you go. Now you have an F sharp, and you can just go ahead and follow the finger chart. Second finger. This next note is an E, and I'm sure you're figuring out very quickly how to use this chart. That was an open string, that was the same as our first. And now we have an E sharp. Now you notice on the finger chart, there is no E sharp. However, you can take the E and raise it by 1 half step. E sharp and F natural are enharmonic. They're the same place on the fingerboard, they just have different spellings. So that's going to make this E sharp or F natural a first finger in half position. Now let's go ahead and look at the cello fingerings. The cello fingerings are fun because, like I said before, you get 2 sets. So the first thing they're going to ask us, how do you play a C? Well, we know that's an open string, so there's our C. So that first one's a gimme. The next one isn't so much a gimme. We're in first position for this whole exercise, and we know that that pitch is an E. So you look at it, and now you're like, oh, I can play the third finger. But wait a second, there's another set of fingerings that also apply here. If I'm in extension fingering mode, it's also a second finger. So I'm going to go ahead and write 3 extension 2. That covers both my basses. Now remember we covered double sharps in the bass. Here we're going to cover double flats. So this is an E double flat. So if you're on a C string, go ahead and find an E double flat. It's not there. If we do have an E though, then we're going to flat it not once, but twice. When we do that, we find that E double flat is enharmonic with the note D. And D is our first finger. So that makes that answer pretty easy. Next we have an F. F is a straightforward note. It's using regular finger pattern, not extension, so we can put our 4 down. And then we have ourselves an E sharp. Now E sharp is not on the fingerboard either, but we sort of figured out the pattern. We have to raise the E by 1 half step. So there's the E, raise it by a half step, and we get an F. So E sharp and F are enharmonic, and that will be also with the fourth finger. So F and E sharp are in fact the same finger and the same spot on the fingerboard, despite having two different spellings. If we were to keep going, we're going to go pretty quickly here. This is F sharp. Well, F sharp does not fall within 1, 2, 3, 4 finger pattern. You have to go to extension mode to get that. So you have to stretch that fourth finger up 1/2 step, so it's an extended fourth finger. The note is D. This is a straightforward one. It's right on the fingerboard, first finger. D sharp. D sharp is also right on the fingerboard. It is also enharmonic with E flat, and it is a second finger using regular finger pattern here. C sharp. Wait a second. C sharp isn't here. It's not in first position. In fact, if you wanted to play this note, you would have to shift back to half position like the basses did, or you can use a low first finger. And this is another type of extension where you just extend your first finger right back. So we can call that a low first finger. E flat. E flat is the same as D sharp. So if you know that, you might look at your D sharp note, put the same fingering down, second finger. Now the viola and violin fingerings, we're going to do these right together. We start off with the viola, and they have a C string. So we're going to stay on the C string and just follow along. Here, open C string. You notice I generally start with the open string, just so we are on the same page. The next note here is an E. So if we look on the C string and find an E, we see that it goes right across to the high second finger. G. So we look on the C string and find a G. Oftentimes people will put 0 as in open G string, but for the exercise here, we're going to stay on the C string because we're learning different fingerings here. Now, some people will put 4, they'll put L4 and X4 because they're not sure what 4 is it. Well, here we can clearly see that it's going to be a regular fourth finger. It'll be the fourth finger behind a high 3. So we're just going to put 4, plain and simple. F. F, easy. This is a low third finger, meaning that you're going to have your first finger, you're going to have a low 2, high 2. So if we leave our high 2 down, the third finger will be touching it. There we go, low third finger. A G flat. Now we're getting into notes that are a little bit outside of our comfort zone. So here we go, the G flat and F sharp are the same note. We probably know F sharp. We probably know that as a high 3. G flat can also be played with a low 4. If you take your third finger and put it normally where it falls on the C string, drop your fourth finger right next to it. You get yourself a G flat. But you could also take your third finger and raise it a half step. You got your high 3. And then F sharp. What do you notice about F sharp and G flat? Hopefully you've noticed they're the same pitch, just enharmonic. If we jump down to the violin, you start with a G string. Now violas have a G string too. They could follow along on the treble clef. You got to learn treble clef as well. So here's our G string, open G, that one's easy. The next one is a B, find that. It's a high 2, high second finger. Some people will think of this as a normal second finger, but in this case, they're all normal, and we just want to differentiate whether or not 1 and 2 are touching, or whether 1 and 2 have a space. So here it's a higher second finger. Now this is not open D, we're going to stay on the G string for this one. So we find our D here, and we find that it's a fourth finger. You might notice a similarity between the viola and the violin line right now. So here's our C. This pitch is a C. We're on a G string. Go ahead and find it. You should find it with a low third finger. Here's a D flat. We're going to find that. Again, high third and low fourth. It's almost like an enharmonic fingering. And my favorite here is C sharp, again falling at the C sharp / D flat area. And these are the exact same fingerings as the viola. We're just over a string. Instead of the C string, we're doing it on the G string.